What's going on, everybody? How you doing? We're on part 3 of this interview. Sorry about part 2. Got cut off a little unexpectedly, but that's what happens. Sometimes. Usually that's not what happens. Usually my wife is here. It's not very often that she's not here. It's what it is. So, all right, we're on to part 3 of this interview with Neil Peart. And so far it's a really cool interview. This is a donation video. This is for Seth. If you're new here, please subscribe, check out my videos, all kinds of videos, reaction videos, bass videos, music videos, check it out. If you like the channel, you want to support the channel, you can hit super thanks underneath this video. You can hit me direct in the description. I got PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Amazon wishlist, mailing address, and I do donation request videos just like this one. So if there's something you want me to listen to watch, to talk about, a question, anything, hit me direct, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, and in the notes section, leave a description, leave a link. Let me know what you want the video to be on, and I'll make the video. Also, you can email me at jpanreadsemail@gmail.com. That's also in the description. All right, guys, let's get to part 3 right now. Let's do this, bam.
What was the most dangerous moment that you and Michael ever faced on one of these trucks? Because first off, maybe I ought to say to people that don't know that when you are on tour, as much as possible, you ride your bike from the one gig to the next. Why don't you explain that first?
Sure. The basic framework is after a show, I run straight onto the bus, and I will have asked our bus driver, Dave, to drop us at a certain junction where the back roads start. And we'll just sleep on the bus and have breakfast there, usually in a Walmart parking lot or a convenient truck stop. And then in the morning, unload the bikes and set off. And I will have looked at the maps the previous day, and wherever I have to go, there is an interesting way to get there, maybe an interesting little town or a bit of history along the way, cool. Thomas Jefferson's house or a Frank Lloyd Wright building or whatever, some excuse, right, to take that road.
That's cool.
And so, we'll ride all that day, and then toward the end of that day, toward cocktail time, I think, okay, it's time to start looking for a place to stay. And I've got confident over the years where I can do that. And you pick a town of a certain size, I'll know they have a few motels, and I'll go there and look them over and say, okay, let's try this mom and pop place. And the next morning we'll get up and ride to the show. So, for instance, on the last tour, I think we rode 28,000 miles around North America mostly, but also around Europe and South America on one tour. I looked at the itinerary and thought, 4 days between Brazil and Argentina. We could do that.
Wow.
Whoa. That's what I called in the story. It was in the previous book, Far and Away. It's the last story in that book, but it was called Magical Thinking because I believed it could be done. But the danger part of it on a motorcycle is ever present. And as the dangerous moment, we probably never knew.
Right.
Somebody probably went by us in a truck whose brakes had gone out and missed us. One time on the freeway, you would think you were safe. We were riding east on I-40 through Oklahoma City, and just a lane over and 2 seconds ahead of us, a gardener's truck launched a giant wheelbarrow into the air in front of us, and I'm watching this. Where's it going to land? Where's it going to bounce to? The adventures we've had, I document pretty thoroughly in the book, of getting lost in the desert and lost down a one-way road to nowhere, and all these kind of things happen to us regularly because I search out those kind of roads, and we call them the mystery roads when they come up on the GPS, because the GPS isn't sure about them, the map isn't sure about them, but we have time and we always have lots of gas and say, okay, let's explore. We can always turn around. So the adventure is there, but the danger is, despite statistics that will say that the freeways, are safer to travel on than back roads. Well, for me, on my motorcycle, I'm a way safer on a back road with my own destiny in my hands and keeping an eye on the road conditions and the traffic, riding sensibly, riding not by speed limits, by what the road tells me and the weather tells me. Whereas on the freeway, I really feel helpless. So again, that's where it's counterintuitive in a sense that I know, okay, statistically you're supposed to be safer on freeway, but no. The most dangerous times of that, of somebody losing their attention ahead of you, and the vision that you get around you. A motorcycle's senses are, if you survive, are remarkably acute. And I carry them into driving now, and I realize that I'm absorbing information at motorcycle speed.
Very good. Neil Peart, motorcyclist, and drummer of Rush. Rush and ghostwriter. And my guest tonight is Neil Peart, the drummer and lyricist for Rush. and we're talking about the 40th anniversary tour and also his brand new book, Far and Near, which is just fascinating. On another subject, Universal is going to reissue your catalog in vinyl. Is this true?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I know. It's we have always, I think, every record has come out on vinyl to the few hundred people who are interested. And, you know, as far as we're concerned, of course, it's beautiful to see the 12 by 12 format for your album art. So that's one reward right there. And whatever medium, you talked before about objects too. And the one thing that I think is lost in the digital world, although there are many rewards and many ways in which I use it myself, but I do love holding a book in my hand is a way different thing to looking at my story on screen. You know, there's just a feeling about that and what it used to be an album or a CD, DVD, especially a book, I guess, because so much time has gone into that object. So for anyone who's still interested in a piece of art, really. That's the way it always was, as we conceived the music, of course. And in the old days of side one and side two, they were absolutely sets of music to us. And we chose the songs very carefully for those roles and tried different orders of songs and all that. When you had two sides, it was that much more complicated. And then the album cover art, of course, all of those years, again, care has been taken. It was always important. And tour books were important, too. Again, another object that people can hold and look at over time. That's the other aspect of it too. And there's a certain idea that things that are on the internet are permanent in a way, but they don't feel permanent, do they? They feel totally transitory. And I've had trouble turning over to ebook reading, for example. And one of my greatest presents to buy for people at Christmas is books. And this year, for the first time, I realized more and more of my friends are reading ebooks. Am I really burdening them by giving them this lump of paper, you know, that they might not want to carry around with them? So that's always my first go-to for presents for people. I can always choose books for anyone. You know, I have a sense for that like in conversation, I will always have one subject in conversation in common with someone, and I can always pick a book for anyone that I know well enough to. And that saddened me this year, realizing, oh no, you know, my go-to choice and my most satisfying choice for friends was to give them a book that I thought they would enjoy. So those kind of things, you can't buy music for people very well anymore. You know, as soon as it's going to be the same with books. So objects remain a certain talisman quality for people still. And vinyl, of course, is the extreme of it. And regardless of the taste or what you hear or think you hear in that medium, it doesn't matter. The fact that it's of value to you, you know, as an object in the way that my books are to me, that's beautiful.
And there is a resurgence of interest in vinyl. A big resurgence, and even among younger people, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely so.
I have some questions from my friend Dominic Nardella, who you know.
Yes, we met at our previous interview under the same terms.
Yes.
He did well last time. We'll give him another break.
We'll give him another shot, because he had some good questions, and being lazy, I thought, well, good.
Yeah, really.
Excellent. Less work for Jim. His first question is, any plans for additional musicians on this tour similar to the Clockwork Angels string ensemble?
Oh, beautiful question. No, but for all good reasons. We were so grateful to have accomplished that, and they talked about it for years. Oh, wouldn't a string section be great? Oh, yeah, that would be great. And finally made it happen and enjoyed it so much, not just musically, and I've written about that in the book too, what it meant to us socially to have somebody else but us to talk to every day. And it became a ritual. Every day we'd come in for sound check in the afternoon. We would march up on stage over to the string riser and talk with them, you know, and share the day off, socializing and all that. So it really broadened our world for that tour. And it was so satisfying, of course, how great they sounded on stage and their energy that they brought to their performance, because all of them, of course, if you're a violinist or a cellist, you come up through the classical world that's pretty sober in many ways. And for them to be in a rock band and to feel like a rock band and to be allowed to feel part of it, as they certainly were working with us, was a charge for them. And that charge, which is totally the right word, electrified them, and it came out with them on stage. And having that energy field around us was so great. But having done it, it's like, okay, We did that wonderful thing. And now I think in this really the basics aspect of being a trio is appealing because of that, because we went to the other extreme, right? We did it, accomplished it, loved it, are so grateful for the results of the recordings and the video that we made of that tour and everything. So having done that, check. Now I said, okay, what about the three of us again?
Yeah. Especially the 40th anniversary, I would think, would require the three of you.
Yeah. Well, really, yes.
His next question, is it possible that on the R40 tour, Rush may perform a song that they have never played live? He goes on to make a suggestion. Fan polls are leaning towards Losing It from the Signals album being the one song that would, well, to quote Dominic, would lose their shit if the band played.
Can you say that on the radio?
Apparently not.
Well, yes, we have talked about every aspect. As I mentioned, we really threw an open field to ourselves in terms of song selection, and we let certain albums that we represented a lot in recent tours to say, okay, we don't have to do that album, those songs. So we want to touch on the high points along the way and make a kind of a digest for ourselves chronologically. And yes, there are songs being discussed that are deep tracks. And that was even one theme that we even talked about that theme, should we do that? I said, no, what we do want to celebrate is the high points where we reached the audience.
Right.
A lot of the deep tracks for us might have been disappointing, not necessarily as a piece of work, but because they spoke to us so well and that maybe didn't bridge that gap to the listener. You can't always make the communication leap that you hope for.
Right.
One reason that Geddy always defined mixing as the death of hope. There are a lot of songs that we had.
I love that line.
Yeah, I know. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
I always call it the death of waiting because I'm impatient. But there are those songs that you really had aspirations for more than that, passionate hope for, that's for one reason or another didn't realize themselves and maybe didn't reach the audience as strongly as other ones did. So that's fine, and you still treasure them yourselves and maybe hope in another lifetime you can redo it and get it right. But on the other hand, of course, we have a wide body of work that did reach the listeners, and sometimes in a profound way as part of their lives. And one subtitle I used in one of my books, Traveling Music, was The Soundtrack of My Life. And I know that resonates with our audience, and I see them. There might be a mom and a dad there with their kids, and maybe grandpa and grandma too. And we've been able to speak across that generation, even as musicians. It's wonderful that Taylor Hawkins told me a story a while ago that he had bought one of the banners for my Tama drums floating on the lake. There was an advertising thing that the Tama Drum Company did in the early 80s, and it was an inspiration to him as a kid, so he bought one on eBay. And I was writing about the old days. I toured the studio, Le Studio in Quebec this summer, that's long abandoned for about 15 years, and walked through all those memories and looked out at the lake and remembered my drums on the lake out there, and I wanted to use that illustration. And I remembered Taylor. I said, Taylor, can you send me a picture of that banner so I can use it? And he sends me a picture of his son in front of it, holding up his drumsticks, and it's like, okay, down to another generation of inspiration. And that is just, as pure drummer is wonderful. But on the whole, I was saying before that songs that rose out of our youthful frustrations and youthful mysteries and wonderings and all that, sometimes at best, like I mentioned the example Subdivisions, which is pretty hard to beat in terms of background and its resonance for us and so many others, and that becomes someone else's touchstone too, so that when they hear that on the radio, I think in one of the stories in the book I was writing about all the things that can trigger memory, sense of smell is said to be one of the great ones and all that, but is there any vehicle, time machine, I was writing about time machines and what a drum set is, and an old drum set is a kind of a time machine, any old instrument is, but is there any greater vehicle to convey you through time than a song? I don't think so. There are many things that trigger your memories, but there's sometimes you can hear a song that maybe you haven't even thought of for decades if you have achieved age like we have, proudly, right? You'll hear a song that you haven't heard in so long and go, wow, and then boom, right back to that time. And check your premises too. I loved about that. Somebody sent me a link to a concert that was done, that was supposed to be the last of the super concerts done in Britain in 69 or so, and the opening band was Colosseum, and a band I loved back in that time, a drummer that was just great, John Heisman. And I watched a bit of it. I wonder if he is as good as I thought he was. And sure enough, I watched him play, and he had beautiful technique and posture, and his musicianship was impeccable. I said, okay, good. When I was a 15-year-old 7-year-old kid, I knew what a good drummer should sound like. So that's the vehicle of music in terms of memory like that. So I recognize that our fans over that time, there are certain songs that for them are not just about that moment, but all the moments since, and it encapsulates so much for them, not necessarily nostalgia. And I don't think of us as nostalgia or those songs. And you were just playing Free Will, for example. That still sounds good to me, and I'd still have you to play that song. You know, so that's a good point of reference for ourselves, too. I'm not distant from that song at all. It still resonates for me.
Great answer. Great. He's got two more here. And I thought this was fascinating because I didn't know this about you. Dominic wants to know, do you still personally make the pre-show mixtape that the audience hears as they are entering the venue waiting for Rush to take the stage?
I do. I have done that since, since the late 70s. I used to make them all, and at that time when there was a lot of current music in the same sort of taste area as ours, and I would push it a bit through the early 80s and all that. I remember playing a lot of what was called New Wave and New Romantics at the time that I really liked, because I was still, and am still very much a music fan. But yes, I do, but I've moved more into the field of classic rock to find the musical relationship to the show that we're about to perform has to relate to the music played before. So I find myself much more going to the music that formed us, which is perfect too. Before the show, the audience is hearing music that I've chosen, and the other guys often suggest things, or I'll check, well, what about that? Music that was formative to us plays before we come on and play the music that we formed.
So you're finding the deep tracks.
Exactly so. Let's do that again.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. That's it. For part 3. That's pretty cool, actually. He picks, it sounds like mostly he picks the songs that people listen to before the gig. That's pretty cool. Lots of cool stuff also still. The only thing that I wrote down and it caught was more in the beginning when he was talking about traveling and finding alternate roads, and I really like to drive, and I like to do that. I like to literally do that. I think it's really cool to because there's so much to explore and see that's not on the main road. Like, you're seeing countryside or neighborhoods or subdivisions or hillsides, just all kinds of backroad stuff that it's just awesome. It's awesome. It's where you see all the cool stuff. You're seeing where locals live, how locals live, what the architecture is, what the houses look like, what the yards are like, what the landscape is like. All that stuff I think is awesome. I love that stuff. I love doing that. And he talked about driving on a freeway in somewhere and having a wheelbarrow fall off of a truck. Well, that reminded me when I was in Los Angeles driving to a gig in Orange County. I was driving, I want to say it was like the 710 or the 605 or something to what the hell is that? I can't even believe it's been this long. It hasn't even been that long really, but I forget already. What is that damn road? It wasn't the 5. It was something else. Maybe it was the 5. Anyways, I was going from one freeway to the next, and I was on a ramp, and there was a truck in front of me, but like a little ways in front of me, but there was nobody in between us, and they had ladders, and a freaking ladder just came flying out, and luckily I was back far enough. There was enough space between us that it hit the ground and basically was on the side of the road before I even got there. But it's just like, dude, are you kidding me? Oh, there was another time, actually. There was another time that this is when I was in college. I was in a Dave Matthews Band tribute band, actually. This is one of my first gigs as a musician. Not really. I did gigs in high school also, but like for some reason to me that's like when it started, was college, where I was making money regularly doing music, right? I was in a Dave Matthews tribute band in Boston, but there was many Dave Matthews tribute bands all everywhere basically, and there was like at least 3 of them out of upstate New York, and one of them found our website and messaged me and was looking for a sub for a weekend, and I had it open. I had it open, and I had like 3 days to learn like 60 songs, because here's the thing, the band that I was in, we had only done one gig. We were like, basically I joined it and we were like getting it started, and we had only done one gig so far. We were only doing like the recorded versions. We were doing recordings basically. But this other band that I subbed for, they were doing live versions. So it had other different kind of arrangement things, extra things, different kind of groove sections or transitions, stuff like that, different songs that medleyed. So it almost kind of was learning a lot of songs. And also they did way more than us, you know, like we just had probably like 20 or 30 by that time. We didn't have more, we were still new at doing it. So I did all that. I crammed all these freaking tunes in like 3 days. And then we had 3 gigs. One in somewhere upstate New York. One it was somewhere in Pennsylvania, but it was like where was it? It was like a college town kind of vibe in like northeastern Pennsylvania, somewhere up there. And then the third one was out in western Pennsylvania, but not to Pittsburgh yet. It wasn't that far. It was like Altoona or Johnstown or something, like out there. It was somewhere over there. It was like kind of middle of nowhere. That one was a weird gig. I remember that the first one was kind of a weird gig. The second one in the college kind of area was really cool because it was like lots of young people. It was kind of like a downtown area that it was packed. And then the other one was kind of a weird gig. Anyways, this was before GPS and all that crap. You had to print out the MapQuest, right? That's what I was doing to get to places, get to all these gigs, to get to rehearsals, to get to people's houses, to get to anything when I lived in Boston. It was all like print out MapQuest or like have a map, right? And for those gigs, I did have that, but mostly I was just following the van, right? Because I was just like subbing and they were driving themselves in a van that they had. And they were going freaking 100 plus miles an hour the entire time. And I had to follow them and not lose them. And I wasn't I was like, are you kidding me? Like, really? Like, really? In between one of the gigs, they hit this massive piece of rubber tire that was on the ground, and it flung and smashed my windshield, and a huge crack right across the entire windshield. Luckily, it didn't like break or anything, but the windshield needed to be replaced. It was a massive crack, and I was so mad. And no, they didn't pay for it. They were total dicks. They were total dickheads. Anyways, that's a whole other story. So yeah, stuff like that. Road hazards. Yeah. The more like he's talking about, like, statistically you're like safer, right, on like the freeway or the interstate or whatever. But here's the other thing about it. When you're traveling for a living, like he did and like musicians do, you're on the road an intense amount. You're like a truck driver, the longer that you're on the road, the more likely something's going to happen, like the more likely you're going to get in an accident. Like, yeah, okay, you're more practiced at driving, but still, like, you're giving more opportunity for things to happen. So it's just one of those things. Anyways, that being said, I really love to drive. I do. I love driving. It's awesome. So anyways, that was another cool portion of the interview. We got 3 more parts left. Oh my God, amazing. Cool. Thank you guys. I'll catch you in the next video.